Hello everyone, back tuning into today's second video, doing GWV Sunday Round Up for today's second video. So it's going to be your usual eclectic mix of this and that for your Sunday afternoon viewing pleasure. We'll start off having a look at the central temperature. We've got news about what's happening with ENSO, so there's been some developments there. We've also got news on the QBO, have a look at the Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation, and the weather next week, 10 days as well. So a lot to cram in to today's video. Just say that the first video was the fourth summer 2018 analogues update. We're looking at the 25 wettest marches on record back to 1910 for England and Wales. And the summers that followed them, because we have had quite a wet March. It comes out actually March 2018 for England and Wales at number 7 in terms of the wettest marches on record going back to 1910. So have a look at that, see what you think. It doesn't paint a very pleasant picture really for the summer. It's been a consistent signal with many of the analogues that we've looked at so far this season, although it is early days and there will be several more analogues updates and at least 2 more seasonal model roundups before we finally get to the summer forecast that we'll be releasing on the 27th of May. So see what you think to that. It's on the homepage. Just scroll down the page a little bit. You'll find it above Stow Desk later on today. That video will be placed on the summer updates forecast page, and there'll be a written report that goes with it as well. That'll be around 6 or 7 o'clock this evening. Right, let's get on with your sunny roundup. Let's start off having a look at the central England temperatures. So currently, provisionally, from Hadley, we are standing at 7.2 for April 2018, which is above average. We are close to 1 degree above the 61 to 1990 temperature average. That's provisional up to the 6th. When this updates later on today, taking into account yesterday's temperatures, I suspect that will tick up a little bit more, because it's quite a muggy day yesterday through the CET region. Of course, we know what's happened so far this year. We find that January was warmer than average month, around 1.5 degrees above average, but February and March were both cold. And interestingly, for the first quarter of the year, January, February, March, we find that January was the mildest month of the 3 months of sort of Q1 2018, which is quite unusual for that to happen, for January to be milder than February or March. But that's what occurred there. And as I say, we've gone above average now for April as well. We always expected April was going to be a milder month. The analogues that we were working to for the spring forecast looked like that for March. So March was always expected to be a cold month, whereas a strong blocking signal right way back to November. We have that strong blocking signal there for March, with the below average heights going underneath it. And the jet stream also going underneath that blocking signal as well. So everything really was pointing to a cold March. But for April, we always expected a reversion. It's quite a complicated pattern that we have with our analogues for April, but essentially we was looking at the ridge strengthening to the southwest, which would start to push the jet stream back northwards. Still a leftover legacy of blocking up to the north and also over to the east. So that's all left over from the winter and March pattern. But essentially April always looked like it should be the month where spring will get going. Not necessarily all that dry. It is still quite an unsettled 500 millibar height anomaly that we see there for April. But overall, we did expect April to have warmer potential. When we did the spring forecast, I think we said that it was likely to be the month where spring will finally get itself going, and after the delayed spring of March, we would start to go into a much nicer spell of weather. But still quite unsettled at times. So we'll see how that pans out. But certainly at the moment, looks like April's going to be a significantly warmer month compared to March. And possibly it might even come out as a warmer than average month, but of course it is early days on that. We're only into the first week. It only takes a cold snap to lower the temperatures, and you can get those cold snaps in April. It's one of those months where you can very quickly change the weather feel. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, as I say, we have had news about ENSO. So this is the cold and warm episodes by season chart from the Climate Prediction Center and NOAA in America. We have had our La Nina designated. So I've been talking about this for a while. To get either an El Nino or a La Nina officially designated, you have to meet quite strict criteria. So you have to have a temperature anomaly, a sea surface temperature anomaly in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. That is, if you talk about La Nina, it's got to be 0.5 degrees or lower below average, and it's got to be over 5 tri-monthly periods. So and if you do that, then you will find that on this chart, the numbers in the boxes turn blue to tell you that you've had a cold event. It's the same idea for El Nino. It's just with El Nino, you have to have the temperature anomaly at 0.5 degrees or more above average in terms of those sea surface temperature anomalies. Again, over those 5 or more tri-monthly periods. So we have now done that. The latest update from the Climate Prediction Center and NOAA came out at the start of the month, and you can see that we now have 5 blue numbers in the boxes here. So this is 2017, where we find that our first blue number is just there for the tri-monthly period, September, October, November. Then we get another one just there, another one just there, minus 1.0, so 1 degree below average, was the peak of the La Nina, of the cold event for the tri-monthly period of November, December and January. And then we've got another 2 just here for 2018. So December, January, February comes out at minus 0.9. And January, February, March, the latest tri-monthly period, comes out at minus 0.8. So the 5 tri-monthly periods reaching 0.5 degrees or lower below average, and so consequently the numbers have turned blue, and we have had an official cold event, an official La Nina event designated. It is weakening, of course, so we'll find that very soon the next numbers in the box, well, this will probably still be blue, but from here through to there, we'll probably find those numbers going back to black. And then, of course, when we get through to the summer, we will have to wait and see where we go from there with ENSO. At the moment, it looks like we're going to go back just to ENSO neutral and stay there for the summer, but we're still at the spring predictability barrier, which means that it's always difficult for the models to see where ENSO is going to go beyond the spring. So we need to wait a little bit longer before the models get a true handle on where this is going to go. Have the latest ENSO update towards the end of the month. Sea surface temperature anomalies, talking of ENSO, looking like this. So this is the area we're talking about in the equatorial Pacific Ocean, where we've got this blue mass just here. That is the decaying signal of La Nina, those colder than average sea surface temperature anomalies through the equatorial Pacific. We're also interested in the northern Pacific Ocean there, and of course the Atlantic Ocean, which is right next door to the UK and Ireland, of course, right there. That's how things were looking when we did last week's Easter Sunday roundup. Let's have a look and see what the latest is looking like. So in terms of ENSO, further weakening of that La Nina signal has taken place. That's how things looked a week ago with those sea surface temperature anomalies through the equatorial Pacific. This is how things are looking now. Clearly, further weakening of the La Nina signal has taken place, which you would expect. You'd expect us to be going back towards ENSO neutral, and that is what we are seeing. So continuing to unravel this weak landing that we've had through the winter. Further north in the Pacific Ocean, very little change over the past week, and very little change in the Atlantic Ocean either. Generally, the northern Atlantic Ocean, this area just here, looks quite cool, but a lot of this around the UK and Europe just here, let's get rid of that, show it again. So a lot of this around here, this is all from the cold weather that we've had over the past few weeks, and particularly during the latter part of the winter and into early spring. Those are shallow waters around the North Sea, around the Bay of Biscay, through the Mediterranean. They're quite shallow waters. They are prone to dramatic temperature changes with the weather, with the air temperature. So you will find those warming up quickly if we get a spell of warm or hot weather across Europe in the next few weeks. In the deeper waters of the Atlantic, so this area out here, this is all where the really deep ocean water is, and the changes there occur much more slowly and over longer sort of time frames. There's been very little change in that part of the Atlantic, the deep waters of the Atlantic Ocean over the past week. I also have news on the QBO as well. So the latest number for the quasi-biennial oscillation is in now for March 2018. So we're still in the easterly QBO. We started the easterly QBO here. This is 2017. Started the easterly QBO through the summer of 2017. It strengthened through the autumn and into the winter. You'll notice the numbers going more negative. So, for example, we begin at just minus 3.18, but by the autumn we're down to minus 15.28, and by December we're down to minus 18.12, and that takes us through to 2018, where we have the first 3 months of 2018 coming out at minus 19 for the 3 months. So January is minus 19.02, February is minus 19.37, and March is minus 19.77. So still in quite a strong and mature sort of easterly QBO state. When are we going to switch to the westerly QBO? Because this is like a pulse, so it is very consistent, or it's usually very consistent. We did have a situation back in 2015-16 where we should have gone from a westerly to an easterly QBO and it failed. So it can happen that the pulse of the QBO kind of like goes a bit erratic, but if everything is working as you would expect it to do, we should go into a westerly QBO through the course of this year. When will that happen? I suspect, from where we are right now at minus 19.77, I suspect it won't be until well into the summer months before we start to shift towards a westerly QBO. Probably late summer, sometime around July, probably August, before we start to go slightly positive with these numbers. And then it'll really be into the autumn, I think, that the westerly QBO starts to properly get itself going. And I suspect the winter of 18-19 will be a westerly QBO winter. This is from the University of Berlin website. This shows things a little bit more clearly. So these darker areas are the westerly QBOs. The white areas are the easterly QBOs. You see, it's a very regular sort of phenomenon. So it is like a pulse, really. We go westerly to easterly, and back to westerly again, back to easterly, and so on. And it's very consistent, a very consistent sort of phenomena, except it can go a bit erratic at times, and that's what happened just here, where we should have gone into an easterly QBO for 2016, but it failed, and we just stayed in that westerly QBO throughout. This is where we are right now. We're in the easterly QBO, of course. The first signs of a westerly QBO will start up here, where we'll get a grey area or a darker area appearing, such as we see there. We don't really have that yet, so we are quite a way off, I think, going into that westerly QBO. I think certainly the summer will start as an easterly QBO summer. It might start to transition into a westerly QBO summer late on, but I suspect, because there is a time lag as well from when this begins to to it starting to impact the atmosphere. So I suspect it'll probably be more autumn, really, but we start to say we are properly getting effects from the westerly quasi-biennial oscillation. Just an index that's reflecting the strength of the westerlies, really. So a westerly QBO is when the zonal westerlies are enhanced, they're strengthened, whereas an easterly QBO is when the zonal westerlies are weakened. So an easterly QBO tends to coincide with a slightly increased risk of colder winters in particular, but a westerly QBO probably enhances the westerlies a little bit through the winter, and it is more of a signal for a milder winter. But there are many exceptions to these rules. So we do get cold winters with westerly QBO, and we get mild winters with an easterly QBO. Right, this is how things looking on the solar disk and outside of this day from solarham.net. So we are currently completely spotless with the sunspots again today. Solar activity, therefore, is at very low levels and is expected to stay at very low levels through the next 3 days at least. This is the GWV Sunday Round Up Solar Activity Tracker, updated to yesterday from our solar tracker guru, James Ackrill. Big thanks to James for updating this. And we can see that we are at very, very weak levels of solar activity now. So these orange spikes just here, there, where we're getting, still getting some sunspots, but you notice they are getting increasingly less frequent compared to sort of the end of last year. This area just here, for example, where we have many days that are getting, albeit quite low levels of sunspots. We have many days that are getting sunspots, but now you'll notice those orange spikes are becoming increasingly minimal. So actually the days that don't have any sunspots, where we're just flatlining with the orange line down here, those days are getting more and more frequent. So that's telling us that the sun is continuing to weaken, it's continuing to move down into solar minimum. So consequently, the thick green and the thick red lines are now at a very, very low level indeed. There are trend lines, and we can see that they can't actually go much lower before they are just flatlining along the bottom here, and when they do that, we'll know we are at true solar minimum. I think it's going to be a few more months before we get to solar minimum, but we are seeing a very rapid decrease in solar activity at the moment. So really weak levels of sunspot activity, taking us ever closer to solar minimum, and that's going to occur in around 6 to 12 months time. When you're at solar minimum, when you have low levels of sunspots, it's an increased risk of blocking, particularly in the winter, and particularly for Europe and the North Atlantic parts of the Arctic. So around solar minimum, just after solar minimum, you increase the chance of colder winters. We'll continue to monitor the solar activity tracker, and we'll see over the next few weeks and months that we get ever closer to solar minimum. Arctic oscillation observed on the forecast chart next. So the black line here tells where we've been with the Arctic oscillation. Red lines at the end where the GFS symbols are forecasting the Arctic oscillation to go. Just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere. It's not driving anything, just tells you what the atmosphere is doing over the Arctic. So where we are right now is we're negative with the Arctic oscillation. GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic oscillation to stay generally at neutral or below neutral, so in negative territory, going through to the middle part of April. So clearly we still have quite a bit of blocking up over the Arctic. This started back at the middle part of February, really. We had that sudden stratospheric warming that occurred in early February, and since around mid-February, this period just here, we find that the Arctic oscillation has generally been trending negative. We did have a period of positivity with the AO in the second half of March. It didn't last all that long before we went negative again. So blocking has been quite consistent over the Arctic since around the middle of February. It explains why we had that very cold March, of course, particularly cold in the early part of March, where the beast from the east was unleashed. And we're still getting cold shots going down into other parts of the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, whilst for us and for Europe, we've actually turned quite a bit milder now as we've gone into April. In North America and Canada, for example, it's really quite cold there, and I think it's also cold in other parts of Asia too. So the cold has left our part of the northern hemisphere, but there is still enough northern blocking, and we see that from the Arctic oscillation. There is still enough northern blocking to be pushing cold air out of the pole and into other parts of the mid-latitudes. And of course, it only takes an adjustment of the blocking, where the blocking is sitting, to bring that cold weather back to us. So as I've been saying in the videos lately, whilst I am expecting April to be the month, and it's already started, it's the month where spring gets going. We can't rule out, because of what's happened this season, we can't rule out the chance of one final cold plunge, probably from the north, at some point through the course of this month. North Atlantic oscillation looks very similar. Again, black line tells us where we've been with the NAO, red lines at the end where GFS Sunball's forecasting the NAO to go. So as the AO went into a negative trend, so too did the NAO just here in the second half of March. Where we are right now is slightly positive with the North Atlantic oscillation. GFS ensembles forecasting that to drop back towards neutral, maybe even slightly negative as we go into the second half of April. That might be signs of one final cold push from the north taking place, but it's a fairly weak signal, and we need to wait a bit longer to see about that. GFS ensembles looking at Bracknell today. So the red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average for Bracknell down in the south of England. And you can see it's pretty much plain sailing actually over the next few days. This is taking us into the second half of April, which is this period just here. We are quite consistently above average, so clearly we are going to a much warmer phase now. We've left all that cold weather behind that we had in March, and it looks like we're just consistently above average, certainly for the next week to 10 days. Let's go to around the 15th, 16th of April, that period just there to the 17th. To there, it looks very consistently above average. After that, we do get quite a bit of scatter beginning to appear in the latter part of the ensemble. You always get that as you go further and further out. Of course, the models, the ensemble start to play with different ideas. But really, even into the second half of April, it does look quite a strong signal for temperatures to be staying above average. So this is going to be a much, much milder April, if this is right, compared to what we had in March in particular. Not dry though. This is going to be warm and wet, I think, as opposed to warm and dry. We've got lots of precipitation spikes showing up here for the next few days, and more precipitation spikes through there as well. No really consistently dry period showing up on that ensemble. The precipitation spikes possibly get a little bit less for a time just here, kind of like the 15th to the 20th of April, something like that. It might go a little bit drier, but after that it looks like the precipitation spikes come back again, and there's no, as I say, there's no real consistent signal for a prolonged spell of dry weather. So it looks like whilst temperatures are going to be quite warm, there will be a fair amount of rain around at times too. These are the surface temperatures for Bracknell. Those were upper air temperatures. This is 10 degrees just here. That's freezing down there. This is plus 20 up here, and you can see that the trend over the next few days is to lift those temperatures up. So some of the ensemble members are getting close to 20 degrees through this middle part of April, which is really quite warm. It's really quite warm, 20 degrees for the middle of April. It's certainly much warmer than average. Maybe a bit of a drop starting to show up as we go through into sort of the end of the third week of April and heading up into the final week of April. We might be seeing signs of a bit of a cool down. Also, some of those ensemble members are getting some quite cold nights reappearing as well as we go into that latter part of the ensemble, which takes us through the third week of April, running up towards the final week of April. So maybe a bit of a cooling trend in the second half of the month, but certainly up to mid-month, it looks like we're warming up, but we're going to be quite wet. Temperature anomalies a week ahead looking like that, coming out above average for the UK and many parts of Europe now also coming out above average. So I'd say a real change in terms of April compared to what we had during March. Precipitation anomalies are looking like that. A little bit wetter than average, especially for England and Wales. Although, interestingly, northwest Scotland looks quite significantly drier than average. Over in America, as I said, cold air has plunged down into Canada and North America again. So much of central and eastern parts of the United States are coming out colder than average. It's warmer, though, out in the west. Precipitation anomalies for America look like that. Generally, southern southwestern states where it's warmer, it's also quite dry. It's more unsettled with varying from state to state, but it looks more unsettled for those colder eastern states. Finally, just having a look at the GFS and the ECM for the next week to 10 days before we go, and this is how things looking on Thursday when we're in this easterly wind. Now, we've got real headaches this week because we've got this high pressure over Scandinavia that's bringing in this easterly wind. It's a warm easterly, so it's not a cold easterly, but we've got this low pressure down to the south. This low pressure is going to be consistently through the week, throwing up weather fronts and bands of rain. We've got one of those that's getting itself going in the southeast today. Going to bring quite a bit of wet weather to parts of eastern and southeastern England today. We're going to have many days like this through the week ahead where we get these bands of showers or more general areas of rain being pushed up from the south by these areas of low pressure. So it's a very complicated weather pattern actually in terms of the detail, but there will be quite a lot of rain around, as we saw with those charts we just looked at. Will be quite a bit of rain around, despite the fact that technically high pressure is dominating over Scandinavia. That's how things are looking on Friday, when again there's another little area of low pressure across northern France that's heading up our way, probably bringing quite a lot of rain Friday and through to Saturday as well. All the time the air is quite warm, so no problems with temperatures. It's just going to be rather warm rain as opposed to what we normally get, which is cold rain. We go through to a week's time. This is Sunday, and still the basic setup is the same with high pressure over Scandinavia, but low pressure is down to the south and to the southwest, and we continue this as we go into the extended period. This takes us up to day 10, when a more general area of high pressure is trying to develop across the country. So that looks really quite warm. That's that period we saw on the ensemble. It's the 18th of April. The period on the ensemble where it looks like it's going a bit drier for a few days. And also, you remember, a lot of the ensemble members were lifting the temperatures up to around 20 degrees. That could be our first taste of summer. Sometime around 17th, 18th, 19th to 20th of April, we might get the temperature very close to 70 degrees Fahrenheit and dry things out. So that's perhaps our first taste of summer of the year. It probably doesn't last all that long. And right at the very end of the GFS run, it wants to start to move that high pressure towards Greenland and Iceland and have a go at turning winds into a much colder northerly direction. We'll have to wait and see about that. It's a very, very long way off. This is the ECM WF finally. So again, we're in those easterly winds for Thursday, but with low pressure to the south, we'll be throwing up more bands of rain, particularly affecting England and Wales. Scotland, I think, gets the driest of the weather this week. This pattern continues into next weekend as well. This is a week away, Sunday, 15th of April. And then as we go into the extended range of the ECM WF run, again, the same idea. We've got this build of pressure developing over the country as we're going through sort of the 17th to the 18th of April. This is day 10. Wednesday the 18th of April, where we've got a nice ridge extending down across the country. Again, that could well be lifting temperatures into at least the upper teens Celsius, possibly even the low 20s Celsius, with that's around 20, 21 Celsius. It's close to 70 Fahrenheit, would be our first real burst of summer. And it's also pretty dry as well, because it's a nice ridge that's extending down across the country. So just put that in your diary. Around the 18th of April, chance of our first burst of summer. Probably doesn't last very long. Beyond that, I think we've got to be watching out for the chance that this high pressure might try and get to Greenland. might try to turn the winds into a cold northerly direction. Whether it succeeds, that would be very much open to doubt. But certainly in the next week to 10 days, it's staying warm, and it's probably going to get very warm actually for a time just after the middle part of the month. Could get a little burst of summer. Starting very unsettled. The next few days are going to be really quite wet at times, especially for the south. As it turns warmer, around or just beyond mid-month, it may get drier for a few days as well. Right, so that's your Sunday Roundup done and dusty. Don't forget to check out the 4th Analogues update for the summer of 2018. And that's all for now. Thanks for watching.